So today we reach this final stage of our spiritual hierarchy of needs, where we're looking at John having moved into this transition stage, being in the wilderness to help prepare him for the ministry that lies ahead. We come to this fifth stage, the pinnacle, the destiny of this growth stage is to discover a healthy purpose in God. If you want to put this into context, consider Joseph. Joseph is this arrogant young man who has no emotional intelligence in the way that he speaks to his brothers, and they end up hating him. And he gets thrown into the well in the wilderness and carried off into a spiritual wilderness in Egypt, where he ends up being falsely accused of rape and thrown into prison for years, where he discovers his gifts. He hones his gifts with the butcher and the butler and the baker, who had these dreams, and he gets forgotten again, and his character's being constantly refined, so that when he's called on to stand before Pharaoh, he's able to minister in the power of God, and that presence of God and the power of God is such that he moves from being a prisoner to the prime minister. He goes through this experience of learning in the wilderness, learning to hone his craft and have his character shaped, so that when he's then in the point of his destiny, he can fulfill the destiny that he's got, because God has refined his character and honed his gifts. We see it with David, where he's taken as before he becomes king, he has this time in the wilderness. He grows up in the wilderness as a shepherd boy. He goes into the wilderness when he runs away from King Saul, and that becomes his place of security, where he forms, in this Adullam's cave, he forms his mighty men, this band of ragtag rejects who become the mighty men of David, these warriors who fulfill the purpose, and he builds his kingdom with the people that society rejects. I love that, and that all happens in the wilderness, where David's character is refined and shaped. We see it with Elijah as a prophet, that he's taken through the wilderness, has this encounter with God in order to go on and to fulfill the rest of his purpose. And we see it with Jesus, where Jesus goes into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and has this shaping of his character that then leads into his ministry and ultimately to the cross. John has a divine calling. He had this calling before he was born. He's filled with the Holy Spirit before birth. He grows up strong in the Spirit because of the influences on his life. He's been educated in the things of God by priestly parents, and he's influenced, and then he's led into the wilderness. But all of that heritage is then, I believe, shaped and developed in the wilderness to allow him to fulfill what he needs to do. We need to learn the dependence on God. We need to learn the security in God. We need to learn the relationship with God. We need to learn the preparation in God in order to fulfill a healthy purpose in God. And the road ahead for Elijah saw him challenge kings. We see John, the road ahead is he's going to challenge kings and powers and rulers. We see a sense of going through temptation, self-denial in order to have a true perspective. And ultimately for John, this road is going to lead to his martyrdom, arguably the highest calling for any follower of God, and something which many of us find utterly horrific and terrifying. I believe if John hadn't allowed God to take him on this spiritual hierarchy of needs and to develop that sense of healthy discipleship, where the preparation that he's had and the education that he's had leads him into the wilderness to be prepared to fulfill his ministry. And I think without allowing that divine discipleship to happen in the wilderness, there would be something lacking in his purpose. It's part of God's plan for John is to go into the wilderness. And as we now move into looking at John's ministry, we will see the influences that he's had shaping the things that he says, the words that he has, and ultimately leading to his destiny. But for you and me, if we're going to fulfill our destiny and discover that healthy purpose, are we willing to let God lead us through these different spiritual hierarchy of needs in order to grow to become healthy followers of Jesus, healthy disciples of Jesus Christ? Will you allow God to shape you through the wilderness in order to be the person that he has called you to be.